Well, it's the second day of the 15th BRICS Summit in Sandton. Leaders and delegates are expected to deliberate on the expansion of the bloc and, of course, the mutually beneficial partnerships, among other things. Let's cross to my colleague, Rofhiwa Madzena, who is in Sandton right now. Rofhiwa, busy morning for you that side. Of course, earlier you spoke to Agriculture Minister Tokodiza. Very important things that you mentioned there about the trade relationship, especially with China, especially when it comes to our exports, you know, and avocados being one of those. But of course, you've got loads more in store for us. So what do you have for us there, that side?
That's right, Baron. There's a lot to talk about over the last day, and of course what will happen tomorrow. But today, nothing less than informative, but also a lot of learning experiences in terms of what governments need to do, Baron, to improve the landscape under which businesses operate, under which societies live, essentially. I finished off a conversation with the Commissioner for the Border Management Authority earlier on, offline, and we were speaking about the bottlenecks that are created at the different ports of entry, and of course the illicit economy. He shared some scary statistics, Baron, indicating that the illicit economy in South Africa is growing at a rate of about 7 to 8% versus the actual economy of the country, which is set to grow by a mere 0.1 to 0.3% this year. What is the big culprit here? It's the porous borders that we have. You've got a lot of illicit product coming into the country, and of course it's not tracked and it's dealt with in cash, and that leads to about 350 billion rand in lost revenue. So when you go there to Small Street, or you go to another place in the city that sells counterfeit goods, you are costing the economy. And of course what he indicated there is that government is focusing now on investing in the Border Management Authority so that we can close that tap. You know, he made a really interesting inference saying if you walk into a house and it's flooded, instead of going to the source and closing the tap and then mopping the floor, you're never going to be able to deal with that flooding situation. And that is exactly where South Africa finds itself at the moment. But we do have the president of SACI, Advocate Mthogulu, with us this hour, and we're going to be speaking about unlocking those trade and investment opportunities and the kind of discussions that have been had so far. A very good morning to you, Advocate, and thanks for joining us this morning. A very important conversation around unlocking opportunities for a greater investment to grow critical sectors in the BRICS economies. What kind of conversations have you had so far? I do know that you were at the JSC today engaging on that capital markets discussion or panel discussion that they had there earlier on. But what would you say are some of the key focus areas when it comes to unlocking those investment opportunities?
No, thank you very much for having us. Yes, indeed, it's been a very fruitful week, actually. There is the summit, which is taking place over these 2 days, but the work of the business council started as early as last Friday. And from the weekend up to now, we have been looking at sector-specific areas that we need to collaborate on, and it culminated in our AGM, which has adopted the concept of trade and investment promotion as a cross-cutting effort that we need to focus on. So what we've been discussing is the fact that around trade and investment, we really need to focus on 4 key areas. And those are going to be specific and measurable economic partnerships, infrastructure development, finance cooperation, and lastly, skills sharing and knowledge development. So those are actually what we think are going to be the key interventions to drive the growth of trade and investment among the member states.
And in that, I suppose one of the big conversations that we've also had around the key areas that you focus on will be developing small and medium businesses here so they can be able to drive not only economic growth, but to create jobs, which is not an issue that is exclusive to South Africa. Employment is an issue across the bloc, but also across the different nations that are looking to become part of now what has been dubbed the BRICS Plus community, if you will. Advocate, how important is that the strengthening or the development of small and medium businesses to drive growth?
It's extremely important, and that's actually what we've been driving through our chairship this year. You realize that we have always made the point that our membership in BRICS is not simply for South Africa's sake, but also for the continent. And on the continent, our growth strategy is going to be driven by SME and entrepreneurship. So we are very deliberate that the ultimate success of the Business Council needs to be measured by a number of transactions and the impact it has on real business people and real entrepreneurs. So coming out of the newly established Trade and Investment Working Group, of which I'm chairman of, we want to really have a dedicated focus on entrepreneurship, SME development, because that's really where I think the proof will be in terms of how the BRICS Business Council is effective in the lives of member states. But I think our focus now has been very decisive that it has to benefit African entrepreneurs and grow their market share in the BRICS community.
And then, of course, that's this investment component of the portfolio that you run. The trade component, discussions around making sure that we have local manufacturers and producers trading at a beneficial level with the BRICS member states, but also other countries across the continent. And, of course, making that trade easier. So I suppose conversations around cutting those trade barriers so we can get the goods across and create the necessary revenue.
Yes, and that's very important. So coming into this summit this year, but obviously through the life of the Business Council over the past 10 years, South Africa has been maintaining a deficit. So what we need to be doing and what we want coming out of the summit is the fact that that deficit needs to be converted into an opportunity. And how do we do that? That is about how do we maximize the current trade that we are doing with the countries. They are still largely dominated by agri and mining. So what we need to do, we need to find a way of exposing and leveraging on those sectors and creating a larger base of mining capabilities and the value chains around mining, which are going to be an investment in trade capacity building in South Africa. And secondly, how do we use the demand for our agri-products to create a larger community of commercial farmers in South Africa? And once you have these major components of our trade being creating value chains in South Africa, we then add to it development of infrastructure to make sure that we are competitive. Because we believe that it must not just be about charity trade, it must be competitive trade. So South Africa's entrepreneurs need to have the necessary and proper infrastructure to be able to provide competitive products to the market. And ultimately, we think that it will then lead to a services economy that will unlock other forms of trade that we can develop over the medium term. So it's all these building blocks to say, build on what you have looked at now, create value chains around those key products that you're exporting, but over time, then build local value chains, create infrastructure, and unlock more entrepreneurs who can benefit from our strengths in the BRICS community.
Advocate Mtholo, thank you very much for joining us this morning. He is heading up the trade and investment component of the BRICS Business Council. And of course, you've just heard they're having extremely important conversations, Baron, around unlocking those opportunities to further benefit South Africa, the member states, but also the rest of the African continent. And the key is to how to do that, creating that competitive trade that he just described.
Very important, Rofhiwa, that conversation, because as you know, the entrepreneur watching this whole BRICS Summit, what does that mean for me? What does that mean, on the smaller scale? We talk about all of these deals being signed, these agreements being signed, memorandums of cooperation being signed as well. But what does that essentially mean for an entrepreneur in South Africa? We saw yesterday also at the trade fair, there's a lot of potential in South Africa, and entrepreneurs are smart, they are innovative, they are using green energy into their products as well. We've seen some electric vehicles yesterday when Heidi Jockers was at the trade fair. So definitely some great developments taking shape in some way. Thank you so much, Rofhiwa Madzena. We will be crossing to you again a little later on. Of course, the BRICS Entrepreneurial Opportunity and Market Access discussions also took place yesterday at the Business Forum, one of the events of the BRICS Summit, of course. And one of the key aspects there was, of course, unlocking intra-BRICS market access to catalyze intra-BRICS entrepreneurship, inclusive, like my colleague just said, of small and medium enterprises.